Good morning, everyone. We're just going to wait a minute or two for everyone to join. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining us for this webinar to discuss the category selection for the 2023 Consumer and Commercial Products Survey. I'm Lucy Negrete, and I will be moderating today's meeting. On the panel, we have Gracie Wong, who will be presenting today, Muslim Hussein Marty, the manager of the implementation section, Ravi Ramalingam, the branch chief of the Consumer Products and Air Quality Assessment branch, and finally, Michael Benjamin, the Division Chief of the Air Quality Planning and Science Division. I'll now turn it over to Michael for his remarks.
Thank you, Lucy. And thank you to everyone on the call for joining us today to begin discussion on the 2023 Consumer and Commercial Products Survey. CARB's Consumer Products Program is a critical part of our effort to reduce smog-forming volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, in the state, and to attain federal health-based air quality standards. Since 1989, the Consumer Products Program has reduced VOC emissions from household, commercial, and industrial products in California by over 50% by regulating the VOC content of over 100 consumer product categories. In addition, the program has reduced toxic emissions in California by 13 tons per day, reducing both occupational and personal health risk. However, emissions from consumer products continue to increase as California's population and associated consumer product usage continues to grow. To address these anticipated emission increases, CARB has committed to developing regulatory amendments by 2027. These amendments will rely on the latest available survey data. Our last survey for consumer products took place in 2015, and since then, both products and the market have evolved, while California's population has continued to grow. Hence the need for a new survey, which we've titled the 2023 survey, to match the calendar year being reported. The Consumer Products Program is committed to protecting the health and welfare of Californians by improving air quality, including for ozone formation. With that, I'll hand it back to Lucy to address some housekeeping items for today's meeting.
Thank you, Michael. So first, this presentation is being recorded and will be posted online after. I'll provide some information on how public participation will be organized for today's meeting. So we will be waiting until the very end of the presentation to open it up for questions. To make a verbal comment, we will be using the raise hand feature in Zoom. To do this, if you are using a computer or tablet, there is a raise hand button. And if you're calling on the telephone, dial *9 to raise your hand. You may raise your hand during the meeting, but we will wait to answer all questions during Q&A. You may also use the Q&A box to enter in questions as they come up during the presentation. We will address these questions first during the Q&A portion. Please note that the Q&A box is different than the chat box. The chat box will be disabled for this meeting. When the comment period starts, the order of commenters will be determined by who raises their hands first. I or my colleague Austin Henry will call each commenter by name and then activate each commenter when it is their turn to speak. For those calling in, I will identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. I'd also like to remind everyone to please state your name and affiliation before you speak. I'll now turn it over to Robbie for a brief summary of the survey timeline.
Thank you, Lucy. Let's walk through the survey timeline together. Today, October 29th, we're presenting the category selection methodology webinar and gathering feedback from all of you. Feedback submissions will be due by November 15th, and later in November, we'll finalize the category selections. In early December 2024, we plan to officially launch the survey and will host a webinar introducing our new Consumer Products Reporting Tool, or CPRT. Finally, survey responses should be submitted no later than early March 2025. I'll now turn it over to Gracie to give the rest of the presentation. Gracie?
Thank you, Ravi. So now I'll go over some common acronyms that we'll be using in this presentation. So first we have volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. And we also have low vapor pressure VOCs, or LVP VOCs. And these have low volatility to evaporate into the atmosphere. We also have exempt VOCs, which have negligible reactivity to form ozone, and they're exempt from our mass-based VOC limits. VOCs and LVP VOCs together make up reactive organic gases, or ROG. And VOCs, LVP VOCs, and exempt VOCs together make up total organic gases, or TOG. We also have the State Implementation Plan, which we call the SIP, and these are plans that describe how an area will attain the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. There's also ozone forming potential, or OFP, and this is the mass of ozone that is formed per VOC or product. And lastly, we have product-weighted maximum incremental reactivity, or PWMIR. You can think of this as the reactivity of a product, and it's defined as the mass of ozone that is formed per mass of a product. And in our category selection, we've identified 3 drivers and developed specific methodology to guide our selection process. So the first driver is the fulfillment of the 2022 State Implementation Plan commitment. Our second driver is to capture the changes due to US EPA regulations. And our third driver is to promote our program's Talk 6 priorities. So first I'll go over the first driver, fulfillment of the 2022 State Implementation Plan commitment. So in this graph here, we have the statewide consumer products and aerosol coatings VOC inventory growth. On the y-axis, we have the VOC emissions in tons per day, and on the x-axis, we have the year. So our state implementation plan commitment is based off of the VOC growth from 2023 to 2037, which is our target here. And between these 2 years, we see 28 tons per day of VOC emission growth. So our state implementation plan reduction commitment by 2037 is to remediate the majority of this 28 tons per day of VOC growth. And so we've come up with 20 tons per day of reductions as our target. So this graph here represents our 2022 state implementation plan commitment. On the y-axis, we have the VOC emissions, and on the x-axis, we have the years 2023 and 2037, our target year. So between these 2 years, we have 28 tons per day of growth. And our state implementation plan reduction commitment is 20 tons per day to remediate the majority of this growth. And our state implementation plan commitment can be achieved by either 20 tons per day of VOC reductions or 20 tons per day of VOC equivalent reductions. So for the first time in Consumer Products Program history, the state implementation plan commitment is expressed as a choice of these two metrics, VOC reductions and VOC equivalent reductions. And this flexibility is to broaden our focus to total ozone forming potential because our end goal is to reduce ozone. So here we have the state implementation plan commitment represented by VOC emissions. And here we have the same thing, but represented by ozone forming potential. So you can see between 2023 and 2037, we have 73 tons per day of growth for ozone forming potential. So to broaden our focus to ozone forming potential, we want to ask what is the equivalent ozone forming potential reduction to this 20 tons per day that is our VOC state implementation plan reduction commitment. So this is represented by this light blue rectangle here with a question mark on this ozone forming potential graph. And we calculate this by taking our 2037 VOC reduction goal, multiplying it by our total 2037 ozone forming potential, divided by our 2037 VOC emissions. And we get 57 tons per day of ozone forming potential reduction. And we need to consider all total organic gas contributions to ozone. And this is because the ultimate purpose of the state implementation plan commitment is ozone reduction for attainment. So here I have a stacked bar chart, which shows the total organic gas emissions for the three different VOC constituents. So yellow is VOC, light pink is LVP VOCs, and in red we have exempt VOC. And you can see that VOCs in the yellow bar make up the majority of TOG emissions. And in this bar chart, we have the TOG constituent reactivity. So you can see that the middle bar that represents LVP VOCs has a much higher reactivity compared to VOCs or exempt VOCs. And when you multiply the TOG emissions by the reactivity of these three different constituents, you get ozone forming potential of each of them. And you might notice that the LVP VOC's TOG emissions is only 27% of the total TOG emissions, while it represents 44% of the total ozone forming potential. And so over 30 years, this program aimed at reducing ozone by only reducing VOC emissions. But you can see that there's a significant ozone contribution by LVP VOCs as well. So there's a lot of untapped reductions in LVP VOCs, but also in VOCs that are more reactive compared to other VOCs. So this is why we want to focus more on reactivity and ozone forming potential. So focusing on ozone forming potential is a more effective approach to reductions since it aligns with our ultimate goal of ozone attainment. So here we have the emissions data for some of the categories from our 2015 survey. And we want to take the 2037 total VOC emissions and the 2037 total ozone forming potential. And we calculate our consumer products programmatic ratio between VOCs and ozone forming potential. So we get 0.351 for this. And this ratio allows us to convert ozone forming potential to VOC equivalent emissions. And this is a systematic focus shift from VOCs to ozone across all categories. So what we do is we take the ratio that we calculated and we multiply this by the ozone forming potential of each individual category. And when you sum together the VOC equivalent emissions that we calculate this way, we get the total VOC equivalent emissions. And you might notice that it is the same number as the total 2037 VOC emissions. So what we do is we scale the ozone forming potential using this ratio, and we can calculate the VOC equivalent emissions. So as a summary, our category VOC equivalent emissions is equal to category ozone forming potential multiplied by the ratio of total consumer products VOC emissions over total consumer products ozone forming potential. And this ratio is 0.351. And after all this, when we calculate the total VOC emissions from our data summary, it is equal to the total VOC equivalent emissions. And the use of VOC equivalent emissions allows us to focus on categories with the potential ozone reductions regardless of their VOC content. And so when we look at the ranked categories based off of VOC emissions, and we compare them to the ranked categories based off of ozone forming potential, you can see that they are re-ranked and they are not in the same order. And when we look at ozone forming potential compared to VOC equivalent emissions, you can see that the order is exactly the same. And this is because VOC equivalent emissions are calculated based off of ozone forming potential. It is only scaled based off of the programmatic consumer products ratio that we calculated earlier. And lastly, when we compare VOC emissions to VOC equivalent emissions, you can see that the total in the end, we get the total VOC emissions is equal to the total VOC equivalent emissions of 172 tons per day. And so with our 2022 SIP commitment, we have the choice between two metrics, 20 tons per day of VOC reductions and 20 tons per day of VOC equivalent reductions. And so we choose to utilize the VOC equivalent commitment metric in this category selection methodology and any subsequent evaluations of regulatory proposals. So our second driver in this category selection process is to capture the changes due to US EPA regulations. So the US EPA prohibited methylene chloride in paint strippers in 2019. And paint remover or stripper is a category in our survey that is ranked as the 54th highest contributing category to ozone forming potential. And so since this data is based off of our 2015 survey and EPA prohibited methylene chloride in 2019, we need to resurvey this category to really capture the impact of this methylene chloride prohibition. And our last driver is to promote our program's toxics priorities. So in doing this, we developed the Consumer Products Toxicity Ranking Methodology. And this is based on the EPA Risk Screening Environmental Indicators methodology, and we utilize the hazard-based approach. And from this, we got chemical toxicity weights, which relatively rank the toxicity of chemicals. And from our consumer products survey speciation, we identified toxics and their mass in products, and combined with chemical toxicity weights, we're able to calculate a toxicity score. And this toxicity score allows us to rank the relative toxicity of categories and the relative toxicity of chemicals. And this methodology has been vetted through extensive consultation with OEHA toxicologists from the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. And if there's interest in this methodology, we're happy to present this in a future webinar. So the top 10 toxic chemicals are presented and also the top 10 toxic categories for consumer products based off of our consumer products toxicity ranking methodology. And for these results, I just wanted to point out that the top 5 chemicals have a much higher final toxicity score compared to the next 5. So these are what we're going to be focusing on the next few minutes. So the top 2, 3, and 5 chemicals, methylene chloride, perchloroethylene, and trichloroethylene, have already been prohibited in key categories. So these 3 chemicals have already been prohibited in 43 consumer product categories. And the number 2 chemical, methylene chloride, we've kind of already talked about it, but looking at the categories it's in, you can see that it's primarily paint remover or stripper that contributes to its toxicity by far. And we already talked about how US EPA has prohibited methylene chloride in paint strippers in 2019. And so we already plan to survey this category to capture the impact of the methylene chloride prohibition. And next we have perchloroethylene and trichloroethylene, which are our 3rd and 5th top-ranked chemicals. And these are essential non-flammable solvents for safety uses. So when we look at the categories that contribute most to its toxicity score, for both of these chemicals, it's energized electrical cleaner and general purpose degreaser, particularly labeled not for retail sale. And these chemicals are used to safely clean electrical equipment that still have an electrical charge and cannot be turned off. So they're used for these safety reasons, and there are no alternatives currently. However, in our 2021 amendment, the definition of energized electrical cleaner was updated to exclude products sold to automotive maintenance and repair facilities. So we expect this change to reduce emissions and exposure to these chemicals in automotive settings where their use is not essential for safety. And our number 4 chemical, 1,4-dichlorobenzene. In 2004, CARB prohibited 1,4-dichlorobenzene from solid air fresheners and toilet urinal products. And so now when we look at what categories have 1,4-dichlorobenzene, it's only in the mothballs category. And CARB does not have the authority to regulate 1,4-dichlorobenzene because it's used as a mothball, as a pesticide in mothballs. And because of this, authority is under the Department of Pesticide Regulation. And so to promote our program's toxics priorities, we're left with our number 1 chemical, parachlorobenzotrifluoride, or PCBTF. And PCBTF is the top-ranked toxic among 451 product categories based on the Consumer Products Toxicity Ranking methodology. And it's already been prohibited by a program in 10 categories. And now we seek to explore prohibiting the continued use of PCBTF in categories where it's currently found. So currently it's found in these 19 categories presented here. So in doing this, we also want to ask, how would prohibition of PCBTF in these categories affect emissions? So the way that we do this is we do an analysis where we take a PCBTF containing survey category and we split it up into 2 sets. Set A would be products with PCBTF, and set B would be products without PCBTF. And we find all of these characteristics of these 2 sets. So we find the number of products with PCBTF, the sales weighted average VOC mass, and the sales weighted average reactivity, or PWMIR. And using this information, we can then calculate the potential VOC reduction by assuming the average formulation of the set with PCBTF is replaced with the set without PCBTF, while keeping the total sales constant. And similarly, we can calculate the potential ozone-forming potential reduction. And lastly, we can calculate the potential VOC equivalent emissions reduction by taking the ozone-forming potential reduction and multiplying it by our consumer products programmatic ratio of 0.351. So these are the results of that analysis. In the first 2 columns, we have the categories that have PCBTF, and we looked at the characteristics of the sets with PCBTF and without PCBTF. And from this, we calculated the change in VOC emissions in tons per day, the change in ozone-forming potential in tons per day, and the change in VOC equivalent emissions. And so if there is a red up arrow, that means there was an increase in emissions as a result of prohibiting PCBTF. And if there's a blue down arrow, that means that there was a decrease in emissions. So we wanted to focus on the change in VOC equivalent emissions. And we get a net VOC equivalent emissions increase of 0.16 tons per day. So for our overall survey category selection methodology, we are aiming for 20 tons per day due to our VOC equivalent state implementation plan commitment, and an additional 0.16 tons per day due to the estimated increase in emissions from our PCBTF prohibition. So our total planning target is 20 tons per day of VOC equivalent emissions. And now the way that we select categories is first, we rank the categories in terms of their ozone forming potential. Then we select a planning scenario of an X% reduction in reactivity across all categories. Then we calculate the estimated ozone forming potential reductions based on this X% reduction in reactivity across all categories. And we convert our ozone forming potential reductions to VOC equivalent reductions across all categories. Then we can determine the minimum number of categories N needed to meet the 20.16 tons per day planning target. And lastly, we also want to ask, is this X% reduction in reactivity scenario feasible for all of the categories we ended up selecting? If the answer is no and a category is infeasible to have this X% reduction in reactivity, then we would need to replace this category with the next ranked categories to make up our 20.16 tons per day planning target. If the answer is yes, then our selection is complete and we repeat all of these steps for a new X% reduction in reactivity planning scenario. So step one, we want to ask, what is the programmatic minimum reactivity reduction we need to reach 20.16 tons per day? So first step is to assume a programmatic X% reduction in sales weighted average reactivity for all categories in 2037. Then we want to calculate the programmatic ozone forming potential reduction across all categories. And we do this by taking the 2037 sales multiplied by the reactivity multiplied by the assumed X% reduction in reactivity. And lastly, we calculate the VOC equivalent emissions reductions by taking this change in ozone forming potential multiplied by our consumer products programmatic ratio of 0.351. And so the results of these steps are presented here in this graph. On the x-axis, we have the X% reduction in sales weighted average reactivity. And on the y-axis, we have the change in VOC equivalent emissions as a result of this X% reduction in reactivity. So if we're aiming for our 20.16 tons per day goal, we would need over a 10% reduction in reactivity in all 451 categories to reach this 20.16 tons per day of VOC equivalent reductions. But we don't want to survey all 451 categories. So our next step is asking, what is the minimum number of categories we would need to reach this 20.16 tons per day? So first, we eliminated categories that were recently regulated in 2021. And we take an X% reduction in reactivity planning scenario, and we sort the categories based off of their ozone forming potential reductions. Then we multiply it by our programmatic ratio of 0.351 to get the sorted category VOC equivalent reductions. And from this, we take the top few categories that would add up to a VOC equivalent emissions change of 20.16 tons per day. And from this, we can get the N number of categories that are needed to achieve this 20.16 tons per day of reductions. And we repeat this for a new X% planning assumption until we go through all of our planning assumptions. So step 3, we wanted to quantify the survey effort for each X% reactivity reduction scenario. So in the first 2 columns, we have the results from the analysis in the previous slide. We have the X% reactivity reductions here. And in the next column, we have the N number of categories needed that correspond to each X% reactivity reduction. So you can see with every increase in reactivity reduction we can survey less categories. And the next column is the number of previously regulated categories from this group of categories needed. And across the board, it is about 1/3 of categories have been previously regulated. So this leaves about 2/3 of categories have not been previously regulated. So we think we can get a lot more reductions from these categories now that we're focusing on reactivity. And the last 2 columns are us quantifying the survey effort. So we calculated the estimated number of products and estimated number of companies we would need to survey based off of our previous 2015 survey data. So this table is visualized in this graph here, where on the x-axis, we have the X% planning scenarios, and in yellow circles, we have the N number of categories needed. In purple triangles, we have the product count, and in pink squares, we have the company count. So you can see that there's an exponential decrease in all 3 of these factors as you increase the X% amount of reactivity reduction we assume. So we looked for this area where it kind of stabilized, and we identified it to be from 22% to 30%. And so this is the region where we think we can optimize our survey effort for the amount of reactivity reduction we can get. So here we have the top 15 categories top 25 categories to survey. And if we assume that we can get an average of 22% reduction in reactivity across all of these categories, we would need to survey the top 19 categories. And if we assume 24%, then we would need to survey 16 categories. And so for every increase in reactivity reduction we assume, we can survey less categories. And next, we also want to make sure that in the categories that we select, that our X% reactivity reduction is feasible. So here we present general purpose cleaner non-aerosol category with an 26% reactivity reduction scenario. So in this graph, we have the sales of the products on the y-axis and the reactivity in a log scale on the x-axis. And each point on this graph is a product from our 2015 data summary. And so the dashed purple line here is the sales weighted average reactivity that is currently there. And the dashed pink line is the sales weighted average reactivity if there was a 26% decrease in the current reactivity. And I just wanted to point out that for these lines, they are not the products don't have to be below this line. This is just the shift that we would like to see in the average reactivity of the products in this category. And in the yellow box up here, we have the estimated amount of VOC equivalent emissions reductions in tons per day that we expect to get from a 26% in reactivity reduction. And we also calculated the percent of products under the planning scenario. So this is the percent of products that are below the dashed pink line. And this is an indicator of the technical feasibility of product reformulation. We also calculated the percent of mass or sales under the planning scenario. And this is an indicator of consumer acceptance of reformulated products, because not only do products exist under this dashed line, they also have high sales. And so for this category, the values for this is 68% and 76% respectively. And so we determined that the category general purpose cleaner is feasible for an approximate 26% reactivity reduction. And here we have a category where we determined it's infeasible for a 26% reactivity reduction, and it's rubbing alcohol. So you can see this is the same graph, but with rubbing alcohol. And there are only 4 products that are below the dashed pink line. And so when you look at the percent of products under the planning scenario, it's only 4%. And also the percent of mass under the planning scenario is only 12%. And intuitively, you can also think that rubbing alcohol is only formulated from mostly water and isopropyl alcohol. And so the difference in reactivity between these different products are just different dilutions of isopropyl alcohol. So the products with a higher reactivity are probably closer to 100% isopropyl alcohol, and the products with a lower reactivity are probably around 20% isopropyl alcohol. And because of this reason, we determined the category rubbing alcohol to be infeasible for a 26% reactivity reduction. So here we have the list of categories to survey. And since we want to remove rubbing alcohol category, since it's infeasible, we now need to replace the VOC equivalent emissions we would get with the next ranked categories. And we've decided to go with the center of our range for the X% reactivity reduction of 26%. So here we present all 34 selected categories for our new survey. First, for our state implementation plan commitment driver, with a 26% reduction in reactivity scenario, we have 14 categories to survey. Next, we have the US EPA regulation, and we have 1 category, paint remover or stripper. And lastly, we want to aim for a PCBTF prohibition, and we would need to survey these 19 categories that contain PCBTF. And with that, please contact us in the following ways. Subscribe to the listserv for announcements on the launch of our survey. Please provide feedback on this webinar by emailing the survey help box at 2023 cpsurvey@arb.ca.gov. And please provide feedback by November 15th so we can incorporate this into our survey launch. And for any program-related questions or general inquiries not related to the survey, please email the General Consumer Products Program Help Box at csmrprod@arb.ca.gov. And now we'll take any questions. You can either submit them written questions by typing in the Q&A box, or submit verbal questions by using the raised hand function or dialing #2 if calling in by phone. And our moderators will unmute you when it is your turn. And before you make a question, ask a question or make a comment, please state your name and affiliation. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Gracie. We're going to start with the questions we have in the Q&A. Our first question was, does this cover lip protectant lip balm stick that is anhydrous? I'll go ahead and answer that. We aren't surveying any lip balm, lipstick, or skin protectant products, so that would not be included. The next question we have is from Anonymous. How does CARB determine whether a given non-exempt organic compound is or is not a VOC? And I will let my colleague Nicholas go ahead and answer that. Okay, thank you, Nicholas. And then the next question we have is from Joanna Kuspert. I believe this is a question pertaining to slide 9. Are 57 tons per day reductions needed for ozone forming potential or total equivalent reduction? How does that relate to 20 tons per day?
I'll answer that. So the 57 tons per day of reductions is equivalent to the 20 tons per day of VOC reductions, but we kind of convert the ozone forming potential to VOC equivalent emissions. So in the end, we still need 20.16 tons per day of VOC equivalent emissions. The 57 tons per day of ozone forming potential was just an illustration of what it would mean if it was ozone forming potential.
Thank you, Gracie. I'll go back to the previous question. I believe there was some audio issues. So again, that question was,
Yeah, so organic compounds or organic compounds that meet the definition for LVP VOC are excluded from the definition of VOC. So the LVP definition is a compound or organic compound that has greater than 12 carbon atoms, a boiling point greater than 216 degrees Celsius, or a vapor pressure less than 0.1 millimeters of mercury at 20 degrees Celsius. So any organic compound that meets any of those 3 criteria are excluded from the VOC definition. Thanks.
so the next question. I believe there was an audio issue. So the next question, are all manufacturer brands producing products in the selected categories in scope of the survey, or will there be exemptions, for example, sales thresholds? I will let my colleague Kyriakis take that question.
Hi, there are no sales threshold exemptions. The reason for that is that even products with rather minimal sales for a category might hold great significance because they might represent products with innovative technology or innovative formulations that are pointing to the future, how we can actually achieve lower VOC emissions or ozone emissions from this category. So every product that is sold in California is important to report, and it's very useful for us to evaluate a category.
So The next question is from Joanna Kuspert. Are all 451 categories considered consumer products? Are they regulated by Article 2? So yes, all 451 categories, majority of them are under Article 2. We do have a couple like deodorant that are under Article 1, but they are considered consumer products. But yes, and just a slight correction on that, not all of them are regulated. The ones that are regulated are under Article 2. So the next question was from Gordon Lee. The list was cut off on the presentation. Was antimicrobial hand soap part of the final categories?
Only antimicrobial dry hand wash or hand sanitizer is on the list.
Okay, so the next question from Kim Tram, what information is requested in the survey?
Hello, I will take that one. So in the survey, we'll be requesting a few things. Contact information, of course, but primarily we'll be looking for products that are represented by these survey categories, their formulations, and then any contact information we need for formulators or any secondary related companies for this survey. So mostly we're looking for ingredients here, and during the next webinar, when we discuss the survey tool, we will go into further detail into what is being requested of you, and there will be more updates to come on that. Thank you. Sorry, and I'd like to add one last thing. We'll also be asking for sales data. Obviously very important for calculating emissions. Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is from Karen Yarusi King. How were the personal care products selected? A few years ago, we did color products, which were found not to reduce VOCs.
I'll take this question. I'm not totally clear. If you could possibly repeat the question, Lucy.
Thank you, Kyriakis.
So we did not select personal care products in general. We viewed personal care products along with all other sectors of consumer products under the entire program. And the ones we selected, any personal care products that are shown here, happened to be selected because they were having a high ozone forming potential and a promise for VOC equivalent reductions.
Thank you. So the next question is from Anonymous. If a business has gone into liquidation, is there still a requirement to report? Please go ahead and send your question to the Consumer Products Help Box, and we will get back to you on that. The next question is from Hadil Al-Nadef. I'm interested in knowing about the consumer products risk assessment methodology.
Thank you for your interest. And we will do a separate webinar for consumer products risk assessment methodology, maybe in January, after the launch of the survey.
The next question is from Allison David. Does permanent dye include only those labeled as permanent, or does it also include semi-permanent and demi-permanent dyes? So to answer that question, it would include all of it: permanent, semi, and demi-permanent dyes. From Anonymous, the next question: can you comment if healthcare medical applications are exempt or not? They would not be exempt. The next question: which cosmetic products are being covered in the survey? My colleague Dan is responding to that right now. The next question from Anonymous: I thought that the scope of CARB regulations exempted OTCs. What has changed?
If those products were previously considered consumer products and reported in previous surveys, then they would still be reported over here if they fall within the category codes that we plan to survey. Otherwise, not.
Mm.
So the next question is,
Excuse me.
oh,
I just want to add a little bit more. I think the question may have been about regulations. That there may be some confusion about what we're going to regulate and what we're going to survey. So this would be the first step where we are collecting information, sales and formulation as part of the survey. That does not necessarily mean that we would regulate those categories. Thank you.
So the next question is from Allison David. Does conditioners without styling claims include both rinse off and leave-in products? Yes, it would include both. The next question from Anonymous: would a non-liquid air freshener cartridge or urinal screen qualify as an air freshener liquid pump spray? Yes, it would. Next question from Anonymous: are face wash scrubs or face lotions and creams included? Yes, that would be included under hand and body conditioner, cream, lotion, and moisturizer. Next question, are over-the-counter drug products, and yes, we answered that previously. So the full question was, are over-the-counter drugs products in the scope of the survey? The next question, how do you extrapolate 2037 sales data?
I'll answer that question. A part of what we do with our survey data, first we collect speciation information, and then that's half of the effort. The other part is sales, which we use to construct our base year emissions in combination with the speciation information. And then we forecast. We have currently in our inventory of the 451 consumer product categories, 2 types of surrogates. The majority of the categories are grown using population growth in California as a surrogate. In the case of personal care products, in our last survey, doing a comparison to existing data, we identified the appropriate growth surrogate is not simply population, but rather population coupled with real disposable personal income. So using either population projections from the state or population projections coupled with disposable income projections into the year 2037, that's how we construct our inventory and our emissions, which we use for these calculations.
Thanks, Kyria.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah. Let me just add a little bit more to that. So we're not projecting sales of individual products or even individual categories. What we're doing is projecting the emissions from the category into the future year. So we don't make assumptions about individual products necessarily. Thank you.
So thank you, Kyriakis and Ravi. The next question is the 30602 conditioner without styling claims for hair conditioner. Yes. Next question from Allison David. Does body wash gel mousses include all forms of body cleansing products, i.e. liquids, semi-solids, and solid state products? Yes, it would. Next question, will you be sharing the slide deck with us? Will someone be available to us when we require additional clarification on how to calculate VOC emissions in our products? So yes, the slide deck is already available online. You can go to the Consumer Products webpage, and under survey webinars and materials, it will be located there. And as for help with calculating VOC emissions, go ahead and email the 2023 survey help box, and any assistance you need, we will do our best to provide there. The next question is, ethyl alcohol considered a VOC or LVP VOC? So that would be a VOC. Next question from Ankur Shah. Since we are removing PCBTF as exempt, are we following some other solvent as a replacement?
I'll answer this one. Typically, we do not dictate the ingredients in formulations. We are proceeding to survey categories that, based on our current database, contain PCBTF, and then using the new survey data, we will prohibit the use of PCBTF. how those products will be replaced and what will be used to replace products within categories that contain PCBTF will be determined by the manufacturers, by the responsible parties, of course, taking into consideration any regulatory limits that we might adopt for these categories upon prohibition of PCBTF.
Thank you, Kyriakis. So we're going to take a couple of the raised hand questions really quick, since there's only a couple, and then we'll come back to the Q&A box. So first, I see Doug Raymond has his hand up. I will unmute you and then go ahead and talk. So you should be unmuted now, Doug.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I have several questions if I can. First of all, going back to your slides, slide 9 has the VOC in 2037 is 191 tons per day, and for OFP 545. But then if you go to slide 11 and you show those numbers down there, they miraculously changed to 172 and 490. Just wondering why there is a confusion in the VOC tons per day.
I'll answer this one. The sales information we show and the data in slide number 11 doesn't contain the market coverage adjustment factor that we apply in our survey data.
So what's that mean?
When we typically conduct a survey, we always historically assume that there is some portion of what is sold that we haven't been able to capture in a survey. In recognition of that, we apply a correction factor to the sales data. So that is cascading and reflecting in the VOC, ROC, TOC emissions, and OFP emissions.
So why did you use the other numbers on 9?
Those are the actual numbers in our inventory. The numbers that you see here in the data summary in slide number 11, we're using them so we can calculate the programmatic conversion factor and to demonstrate the methodology. It makes no difference in the results. The number, that ratio 0.351 would still be the same.
Okay. Well, it does make a little bit of difference. So it's only 0.35 if you do it the other way.
No, because you apply that factor to every category, so it should not matter.
No, what I'm saying is the ratio number changes from 0.351 to 0.35. But I understand it's only 0.01%, so it doesn't matter. Another question. Just curious, under the toxics, you say you don't regulate pesticides, but you've regulated pesticides in the past. So why can't you regulate mothballs?
So Doug, this is Ravi. Yes, we have regulated pesticides in the past, such as in the 2021 regulation. But when we do that, what we're regulating are not the pesticide ingredient that actually is responsible for the efficacy of the product. We are regulating the so-called carrier solvents and other VOCs in the product. But in the case of mothballs, it's all combined all in one. So the VOC there would be the same as the pesticide, and so we're prohibited from regulating that. That would be Department of Pesticide Regulation.
Okay, thanks. That answers it. Another question that I had, when you go down to the final, there's a couple of categories in here that I have questions about that I've never seen before. Under the prohibition for PCBTF, you have cleanup solvent. I didn't even know that was a category that we could use. I thought those all fell under multi-purpose solvent.
Well, I'll ask Kyriakis to take the first stab, and then either Nicholas or Dan to follow up if necessary. Kyriakis?
The category 60203 cleanup solvent, it has a default definition under it's an exemption to what's not covered under the 60213 multi-purpose solvent non-aerosol category.
So what is a cleanup solvent? I've never heard of this before.
I actually, if you look into our definitions, and you see the defaults, the exemptions for multi-purpose, one of them, the second exemption, is, let me just find it for a second, please. Solvents labeled exclusively for the cleanup of application equipment used for polyaspartic and polyurea coatings.
Okay. One more question on the toxics, the PCBTF. So do I understand that then you will prohibit PCBTF and the outcome of that prohibition will be an additional 0.16 VOCs? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I needed to know. Thank you very much. Great presentation. It looks like you guys have done a lot of work. And how long do we have to comment on this?
Yeah, so that would be about 2 weeks, so till November 15th, and then we will, and we're really asking folks to think about any other categories that that may not be on the list. Perhaps there are companies out there that we've heard already would like to be regulated differently. For example, with an IPE or with a reactivity limit. And as I've said in the past, we'd be willing to consider that, provided we can get further ozone forming potential reductions. So anyway, for us to pursue that, further regulation, we would want updated survey information, which means we would want to survey that category may be added to the list. So please let us know, and then we can be responsive. We'll take all your feedback over the next 2 weeks. We will consider it and then apply it to the final survey category list, which we will release when we kick off the survey formally beginning of December.
And just one more comment, Ravi. I think I know one comment that we will be making, and it'll probably be quite a few people will make, is you're putting this out in December and you're asking it for it by March. I realize that looks like 90 days, but in reality, it's like 60 days, because by the time you get it out in March or in December, we're going to be going into the holidays. And so we're probably going to lose 2 weeks there, and you want it early March. I would respectfully ask for it to be early April, because we're going to lose that time. We're only going to have 60 days to do this. And for some companies, there's going to be a lot of work that has to be done. So I would respectfully ask for at least 90 days and 90 true days, because like I said, if you launch this in December, it looks like the way you put it in here will be the middle of December, but even if it's early December, we still lose 2 weeks at the end of December. So early March would not give us 90 days.
Thank you for that. And yes, so that's another thing that we'd be looking for is feedback on timelines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Doug. So we have another question from Laura Radevsky. So I will unmute you. So you should be just unmute yourself on Zoom and you should be able to talk. Laura, are you online? So Laura, it looks like you're unmuted, but we cannot hear you if you are talking. Laura, I'm going to go ahead and come back to you because we cannot hear you. So I will come back to you after we address the other questions. Okay, so the next person with their hand raised is Hadil Nadef. I am going to unmute you. So unmute yourself on Zoom and we should be able to hear you.
Hello, everyone. This is Hadil Nadaf, Senior Regulatory Affair with Haynes Celestial Group. I have the following question. I see that the conditioner, whether it's a hairstyling conditioner or the hand and body conditioner, are on the list. Can I understand the reason why it's been included, knowing that almost the conditioner products are mainly either surfactant oils in a water base or some waxes, so we don't have even solvents in them. What the reason it's being added to the list, VOC list? Thank you.
So I will let my colleague Gracie answer that.
Hello. Oh, sorry. Hi, thanks for bringing that to our attention. So it is included on our list since it is the top, it's ranked number 4 in terms of ozone forming potential or VOC equivalent emissions. And in our survey category selection, we just rank the categories based off of their ozone forming potential and VOC equivalent emissions. So yeah, but we will look into your concern for the ingredients that it has to see if it's feasible, since we are interested in seeing if we can achieve a reactivity reduction in the categories that we selected. Thank you.
Thanks, Gracie. So I'm going to now, we have another raised hand from, the name just says BH. So I will, oh, okay, never mind. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so we have a question from BH. I'm going to unmute you. So please unmute yourself on Zoom and we should be able to hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Hello?
You might need to turn your volume up because we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So how far back does the reporting go? I know it says it's the 2023 survey, but if a product stopped being manufactured in 2021 or 2022, does it still need to be reported?
So it would just be for 2023. We are requesting years prior to that, but if it wasn't reported in 2023, then it doesn't need to be reported. I mean, if it wasn't existing on the market in 2023, it does not need to be reported.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's. Go ahead. Just wanted to add one thing. Yes, that's correct. And then just an additional clarification, we're asking for products sold in California in 2023. The data mentioned that we're collecting for previous years is just sales data, again, only if they're sold in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. I have another question from Patrick Geiske. I'm going to unmute you. Okay, you should be unmuted now.
Thank you. I do have a question about some of the tonnage. Actually, my question is this: why isn't windshield washer fluid being looked at from a BOC standpoint? Because based on the information from the 2013, 14, 15 surveys, it looks like it's got a fair amount of tonnage, and most of it's methanol, which is a pretty toxic substance itself. Why isn't windshield washer fluid being looked at?
I'll take this. Sorry, 1 second. So the mere tonnage of the sales of a product category is not a driver for a selection. The driver in the methodology we shared with you is the ozone forming potential for categories selected to meet our SIP commitment. So the ozone forming potential, obviously, of the windshield washer fluid is not high enough to make it into the categories we selected. In terms of the toxicity concerns, again, the methodology which we're going to share in January will explain the toxicity that we assign to each toxic ingredient, and then the combination of that with the mass of that toxic in each category and then across all categories to rank either the toxicity of individual ingredients across categories or the toxicity of several possibly toxic ingredients within categories, the relative toxicity of categories. The toxicity concern that you raised for windshield washer fluid, if that is used in the setting that is used, is also important to take that into consideration. Any toxic ingredient is used in conditions where there's a lot of dispersion outside. So it's, even if it was, it's toxic, the setting in which exposure might occur is not a very high risk setting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to, we have one last question. Again, Laura Radevsky, I'm going to unmute you. And go ahead, unmute yourself on Zoom, and let's see if we can hear you this time. Laura, are you on the line? Laura, if you're talking, it looks like you're still muted. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Q&A box and we will come back to you. And if we do not get a chance to hear your question, go ahead and please submit your question to us through the 2023 survey help box. Okay, so going back to the Q&A chat box, the next question we have is from Anonymous. Just to clarify, LVP VOCs are still considered to be VOCs, and as noted earlier in the presentation, do contribute to ozone forming potential. So is there any measurement or determining factor accepted by CARB for distinguishing whether an organic compound is a VOC at all? I will let my colleague Nicholas Berger answer.
Yeah, so LVP VOCs are considered VOCs, but for product compliance, ingredients that meet the definition for LVP VOC are not included in the VOC calculation. So the determining factor is whether it meets the definition for LVP VOC, which is if it has more than 12 carbon atoms, if it has a boiling point greater than 216 degrees Celsius, or if the ingredient has a vapor pressure of less than 0.1 millimeters of mercury, then it meets the definition for LVP VOC and it's not included in the VOC calculation.
Thank you, Nicholas. So the next question is from Anonymous. Will CARB provide definitions for the categories to be surveyed? Some of the categories are not currently defined. So we cannot provide official definitions other than what's in our regulation. We will provide definitions of what has already been defined. Next question, can prorated US sales data be used or does it need to be specific California sales data? I will let my colleague Austin answer this one.
Hello. Yes, you can use prorated US sales data. And on the survey tool, there will be an area where you can indicate what type of sales data you're using, whether it's prorated or specific California sales data, and a few other options. Thank you. I'll also go on and take the next question. What data will be requested for categories that are part of the survey? So again, some additional information will come out regarding this. There'll be another webinar about the tool and what is being requested during the survey. But I can say for sure now that we will be asking for ingredient information, sales information, and contact information for any relevant parties for each one of these products that are a part of these categories in the survey. Thank you.
So the next question from Anonymous, can you elaborate on next steps and what type of feedback is requested for a given category prior to December 2024?
We would first of all welcome any questions you have about the methodology we use to select categories to meet our SIP commitment. If something doesn't make sense or you think we missed something, we welcome any comments or questions. We don't necessarily want any specific questions for any of the categories we selected, but if you do have questions or comments of any kind about the categories we selected and we share here, we would like to hear from you and then engage with you if there's something to explore.
Thank you, Kyriakis. Next question from Paula Brooks. Is category 30411 exclusive to aerosols? And the answer to that is yes. The next question from Anonymous, will there be a better way to submit data than in past surveys? Yes, and I will let my colleague Austin take the rest of that answer.
Yeah, I'll respond to that. Our hope, of course, always is yes, that it will improve as time goes on. During the next webinar and along with our next announcements, we'll give you a much better idea of what the data submission will look like. And we will provide additional information in the form of video modules. And of course, the help box is always open for any questions or to help you answer any difficulties that you're facing during the survey. But our hope, of course, is that we've streamlined a few of the inefficiencies before, and we will always seek to improve them. And as always, any feedback you guys have, please feel free to provide to us. It helps us. And we're looking forward to it. Thank you. I'll kick it back over to Lucy.
Thanks, Austin. The next question is, am I correct that hand sanitizer is in the category but not antimicrobial hand? I will let my colleague Gracie answer that.
Hi, yes, so what's in the list is antimicrobial dry hand wash, which is also known as hand sanitizer. And so, what is it? Antimicrobial hand wash that is not dry is not included.
So the next question is from Paula Brooks. Is category 30404 limited to hand and body, or does it include face? So the answer to that would be yes. I'm pretty sure it does include face. Oh, wait. No, wait.
Limited.
Sorry, limited. No, it's go ahead, Kyriakis.
I had a follow-up actually on this category to a previous comment. A commenter asked, how come this category that doesn't have much other than surfactants made it into our list? If you look at the data summary from our last survey that's posted on our website, it shows what drives this category 30404 to the very top. Even though it indeed has a very low average VOC content, I believe less than 0.5%, what makes this category prominent and important is the very high sales for this category.
Thank you, Kyriakis. So the next question is, what sales year is this survey going to be based on? So the sales year will be 2023. If there were products, the product was also sold in 2021 and 2022, we will be taking sales data for those years as well. And 2023. Austin, I will let you add to that.
Thank you, Lucy. So the sales year that's driving this survey is the 2023 sales year, products sold in California during 2023. For these products, we will also be requesting the sales information, just sales information for 2022 to 2020. For 2023, we will be asking for more detailed information, ingredient information, formulator information. The other years mentioned that are just being requested for sales data is for our own knowledge, and it's for trending information so that we can better see where things are headed. But again, 2023 is the real driving year behind this survey. Thank you. I'll kick it back over to Lucy.
Thank you, Austin. The next question is, what is the survey submission period? The survey will kick off in December and will end sometime in March. We are asking for feedback about timelines. Please get that back to us by November 15th. So the next question is, for personal care products such as conditioners, shampoos, does this only capture only product intended for use on humans, or does it extend to pet care products as well, shampoos and conditioners for dogs? So the answer to that would be yes, those categories are intended for human use only. The next question from Jay Hensel, what type of products would be considered dye permanent? Would this be hair dyeing items? What definition would we be used to determine if it's permanent? So I believe we answered that partially earlier. We said semi and demi-permanent would be included. The next question, are there currently any regulations around adhesive used for packaging, the glue, not tape? Please go ahead and send that question to our consumer products help box. We will get back to you on that. Next question, does the category conditioner include both leave on and rinse off conditioners without styling claims? Yes, that would include both. So the next question, are disinfectants targeted to lower VOC limits or PWMIR limits? So that will depend on what we see in the survey. Once we analyze that, we will determine whether we are going to go with VOC or PWMIR. The next question from Ankur Shah. Focus mainly for paint thinners and reducers for coating systems. I'm not sure if that's really a question. I see, Ankur Shah, you have your hand raised, so I will go ahead and unmute you now and you can clarify your question. So you are unmuted. Go ahead and unmute yourself on Zoom.
Hello. Yep.
Yes,
Hi.
we can hear you.
Yeah. Hi. My question was regarding the elimination of PCBTF, and it was mainly focused for the paint thinners as well as reducer applications. And since since PCBTF is going out, it has to be eliminated from for those uses. And I think somebody I think it did got answered that about some upcoming regulations, so that has been cleared. But my second question regarding those LVP solvents would be, so we got three conditions mentioned, right? It has to be more than 12 carbon atoms, boiling point more than 216, and vapor pressure less than 0.1. Does it have to meet all the three conditions or just one?
I believe it's anyone.
Any one is fine?
Yes.
Yes.
And actually, okay, means while I'm calculating my VOCs, ultimate VOCs on that particular product using LVP solvent, so I consider the VOCs on this solvent as 0, or how do I consider that?
If it's LVP, if it's an LVP VOC, then for your compliance calculation of VOC content, you would consider that portion of it to be 0, apart from the LVP VOC.
Okay, so it has to meet any one condition, and the VOC is considered to be 0 for my final calculations, right?
Right.
Okay, I got one more question regarding this product categories. Based of the formulations we have for a, for a particular application, but if it meets, I would be selling the product as a particular category, for a particular use only. But if that product could potentially be used under numerous under numerous categories, so would I still need to be concerned about my particular category only, or go with some other categories also, which it could probably be used?
You kick it to Dan.
I'm going to pass this question off to my colleague, Dan.
Hi, this is Dan Garrett. So you should use the product category that your product is labeled as. You should refer to the product's label and the labeling claims that are made and use that to determine the best category for it to fall into. I would just reiterate that survey categories are not always the same as regulated categories.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it ultimately is determined by what's printed on your product label. And then if it would fall into, in general, if a product would fall into multiple categories, you should report it under the most restrictive category. And the survey is only asking for like the primary category of the product. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. So the next question would be, would a non-liquid air freshener cartridge or urinal screen qualify as an air freshener liquid pump spray listed in the top 14 categories? Which air freshener liquid pump spray products are included? So if it's non-liquid, it would be part of either the semi-solid or solid air fresheners, and that is not one of the categories being surveyed. Liquid pump air fresheners include actual physical pump sprays, reed diffusers, liquid cartridges, things like that. The next question is sunscreens category. Is the survey for aerosols only? I believe we answered that already, yes. Next question is body wash, mousse, gel, soap, foam, scrub category, including aerosol products. Yes, if they meet the definition of the category, it would be included. The next question, since the survey intends to look at reactivity, what sort of detail is going to be needed when reporting is done? What sort of extra details will be needed, especially for LVP VOCs? I will let my colleague Austin take that.
Hello again. So although we are looking into alternative ways of regulating, there are not going to be any additional details regarding reporting of ingredients that differs in any significant way from before. There are improvements made to the survey tool and the process that would have been made regardless of whether which regulation pathway we pursue. Again, additional information will come out, instructions, videos to help clarify any of these sort of questions in the future. But as of now, I can say that there's not going to be any sort of different, further detailed level of ingredient reporting when it comes to LVP VOCs versus VOCs. Thank you. I'll kick it back over to Lucy.
Thanks, Austin. So the next question, will CARB evaluate reactivity reduction potential in the non-SIP categories? I will let my colleague Gracie answer that.
Hi, so I am assuming that for the non-SIP categories, you're mostly referring to the categories we selected for the PCPF prohibition. And so we've already done an analysis where we estimated the VOC equivalent emissions increase. if we were to prohibit PCBTF in these categories, and we ended up with 0.16 tons per day. And so we've added this to our 20 tons per day goal. So total, we are aiming for 20.16 tons per day because of the extra increase in emissions we expect.
Thank you, Gracie. Next question, are hair products in the scope of the survey? I do believe conditioners without styling claims is one of the categories. And permanent dye. And then I suppose sunscreen, which can be applied to hair or body. So that technically, but yeah, those are the hair care categories that we have on the survey. The next question, will hair oils fall under conditioner? Again, if this hair oil meets the definition for a conditioner without styling claims, then yes. The next question, what is the difference between hand and body conditioner and the conditioners with without styling claims and the reason for including them? So hand and body conditioner would be applied to the hand and body. Conditioners without styling claims would be for the hair. As for the reason for including them, I believe it's because it's to meet our ozone forming commitments.
Yeah.
The next question, does category 30207 body wash, soap, etc. include antimicrobial formulations? And the answer to that would be yes. The next question, are antiperspirants included in deodorants? There's a difference between antiperspirants and deodorants. They both have separate definitions. The next question, will CARB be expecting full formula compositions, or will we be able to group into ingredient categories like with the last survey? I will let my colleague Austin take this one.
Well, so there are two different potential answers to this question. One would be there will be cases where a product is sold as individual products in multiple sizes. So let's say one product comes in a 5-ounce, 10-ounce, and 16-ounce size. The formula composition can be reported for just one of those products if they're all the same formulation. And then the formula name can be reused to assign to those other two products that also share the same formulation. The other answer to this, and I believe this is what you're asking, about ingredient categories. Yes, we will still have a few bucket item ingredient categories where you can group like ingredients into one bucket. As we get closer to the survey, we will include those in the instructions and make those clear to you as well. And they will also be covered during the next webinar, which will go over the survey tool. And I will kick it back to Lucy again. Thank you.
Thanks, Austin. So the next comment, your assumptions are flawed if you use population and personal income, particularly if you're not looking at individual products or categories. I will let my colleague Kyriakis answer this one.
We are looking programmatically at a category. We're not looking at individual products to regulate. We look at the entire set of products in a category. And the data we have from our last survey, we compared the emissions we got and the sales we got, and we were able to establish that for 5 of the sectors for consumer products, using population growth as a surrogate. The data we collected in the last 3-year survey put us where we expected to be using population growth. In the case of personal care products, we did see there was a spike, and we were able to demonstrate that that was explained by the increase in real disposable personal income. If you would like to share more information or for us to explain the underlying growth surrogates, we'll be glad to do so. You can email us and we can engage with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyriakis. So the next question is from Barbara Schweidenbach. Apologies. So she wants to know if 30603 dye permanent refers to hair dye or fabric dye. This would be hair dye. Next question, in regards to PCBTF, will this be as a direct ingredient?
I'm not sure what the
Yeah.
meaning of direct ingredient is. If it is an ingredient, then it's something we need to establish. If in these categories where we identified the presence of PCBTF, if there is an ingredient, we need to verify that in the new survey in order to make decisions about proceeding with prohibition. I'm not sure what we mean by direct ingredient. Is it perhaps, do you mean active ingredient? I'm not sure.
Yes, if you could please send us your question to the 2023 survey help box and clarify, we will get back to you. The next question, how far back does the reporting go? For example, if a product stopped being manufactured in 2021, does it still need to be reported? I will let my coworker Austin handle this one.
Thank you. So in this case, this product would not need to be reported. 2023 will be the driving year. So if the product is used in California in 2023, or sold in California in 2023, we will be collecting, or we will be requesting survey data be reported for those products. And then the 2021, 2022, and 2020 calendar years, I said that out of order, but those calendar years, we're only requesting sales data again for products that were sold in 2023. So in an instance like this, although 2021 is one of those years we're looking at for sales data, since it was not sold in 2023, it will not need to be reported. Now I'll kick it back over to Lucy again.
Thank you, Austin. The next question is from Hadil Al-Nadef. Can you please compare the VOC OFP for ethyl alcohol versus exempted acetone? Hadil, I believe we will have to get back to you on this. Please send your question to the consumer help box and we will respond to it. The next question is from Kelly Haas. Please provide, oh, yes, we will provide a link in the Q&A box, but yes, this is on our consumer products webpage already. The next question is from Sherry Allen. What is the definition of a hair sunscreen? So this is included part of the sunscreen category. It says hair or body. So long as it meets the definition of that particular category, that's what that product would be. The next question, are you going to look at pesticidal products as well in the survey? No, we are not. Next question, 30602 is a hair conditioner, which is mainly surfactants. I believe we addressed this earlier. It's the size of the category, the amount of products. The next question, how was the ozone forming potential determined for the personal care items? It feels that like these categories were selected by sales.
I'll answer this. So ultimately, if a category is important in the methodology we use, depends on the ozone forming potential. The ozone forming potential is the combination of two factors: the sales of products in that category and the weighted reactivity of that category. Let's say you have a category with a relatively low weighted reactivity, but very, very high sales. The product would result in a high ozone. So in the end, even though you have a category with products with either low VOC content or low reactivity, if the sales are very high, when you multiply them, as you see in this slide here, the ozone would be high. So we have to address that category and see if there is technical feasibility to reduce the reactivity of that category. Even small reductions in the reactivity, even though if it's low reactivity, multiplied by very high sales, would result in significant reductions in ozone.
Thank you, Kyriakis. The next question from Harvey Rems. What ingredient in conditioners and shampoos do you think cause its high rankings in your tables?
Like I indicated earlier, some of the important information that can shed light why some product categories have a very high ozone can be surmised by looking at the data summary from our last 3-year survey that's posted on our website. There you can see what's the VOC content, what's the LVP content, and the exact content. You can see the sales and the weighted reactivity of a category. So if a category has a relatively low VOC, but that VOC content happens to be significantly reactive, then it doesn't matter that it's a relatively low VOC content. What matters is that those VOC ingredients are reactive and they contribute to ozone. Likewise, if a category might have low or medium content in terms of less volatile LVP VOCs. If those LVP VOCs are highly reactive, then they contribute to ozone. So you have to look at the data summary we have posted, and that would shed a lot of information. If you would like to discuss with us what we have already posted since our last survey, which is the underlying basis for the inventory we have and the analysis we did here, we would be glad to engage with you and answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Kyriakis. The next question is the category deodorant, does it also cover antiperspirants? We answered this earlier. No, deodorant and antiperspirant have separate definitions. The next question, can you share what the reporting tool will look like or the survey interface? I will let Austin answer this question.
Hello. Again, this will be announced soon, and there will be additional information regarding the survey interface. It'll be an Excel-based tool. There will be a number of ways that we can inform you about the content of the survey. One will be video modules, one will be the webinar, and additional information will be available on our website via instructions and a short checklist. I will also go and answer the next question. Is the manufacturer, is the manufacturer or the brand required report? I'm not sure if is the manufacturer of the brand or the alternative. It depends who holds the formulation information of the product. So again, the information we're seeking is sales data and formulation data for these products. There are a few functions in the tool that will allow us to allow you to provide the necessary contact information for this information to be provided to us so that we can get to the formulation information. So it does depend on who has that information for us. Thank you. I will kick it over to Lucy.
Thank you, Austin. So the next question is, a hair sunscreen aerosol determined by claims made on the pack. Would it include any aerosol product making any UV protection, UV filter claim anywhere on label for a cosmetic hair benefits? If the product label does fit the sunscreen category, then yes, it would be considered a sunscreen and need to be reported as one. If you have questions or concerns about a specific label, please email the 2023 survey help box and we can help you determine if that would apply to your product. So the next question, if a product falls under more than one CARB category and one of those is on the list for the survey, how do we decide which applies for the survey? So an example would be pre-wash treatment and spot remover. I will let Austin answer that.
Hello. Real quick before I answer this question, I'd just like to note, I'll provide a 5-minute warning here for the webinar, just for anyone who may still have their hand up or any further questions. Please feel free to send those in to the box that was posted earlier. But I will go ahead and answer this question. So again, with the category for your product, we're looking at the primary category for this product, and that is primarily determined by the label of the product. If you have additional questions during the survey, please feel free to reach out to us to ask any clarifying questions. But again, it's one category for the product is the primary category, and that is determined by the label, although it may fall into a few different use cases. That's how we're viewing these products as part of the survey. Thank you. I'll kick it back over to Lucy.
The next question, is there a reason we only have a 2-week comment period? Yes, I'll let Robbie answer.
Yeah, thank you. So actually it's, even though we described it as a 2-week comment period, it's actually longer because we provided a list of, a tentative list or proposed list of survey categories previously and well in advance of this webinar. But yes, we did limit it to 2 weeks from the roughly from the time of this webinar because we're anxious to take your feedback and then think it through and weigh it and evaluate it and make final decisions. And we want to kick off the actual survey as soon as possible. And that would be in early December. We're going to be using the survey for our regulatory process, which would culminate in 2027. And so having information from industry and turning it into an emission inventory and having the time to QA all the data and ensure that we have your submissions right and that we understand everything. That all takes time. We want to make sure that everything is good, all the data is good before we use it for regulatory purposes. And then the reg development will, necessarily take a lot of time as we engage with industry and other stakeholders and listen to any concerns. So anyway, all of that means we need to make haste. Thank you.
So I believe we have time for one last question and then we'll have to end the call. So the last question that I'll read off, but before I say that, Please, as Austin said earlier, if we didn't get to your question, please send them to the 2023 survey help box and we will respond. If there are any questions you had here today or anything that comes up later. So the last question would be, will there be a comment period after the December webinar? So to answer that, no, there will not be a comment period after the December webinar. The December webinar will be most likely for the CPRT, and we will be answering questions there. And if you have questions after, we will take them through the survey help box. So I believe that's all we have time for. I'm sorry if we could not get to your question. Thank you for participating in today's webinar. If you have any comments or feedback, please get them into us by November 15th and send it to the survey help box. Thank you.